Hey guys, it's Ryan here with HobbiesofaMan once again, and today we're talking about Calvin and Hobbes. And I already tried to review this once, like 5 seconds ago, but I kind of went off on weird tangents, and it was really hard for me to understand what I was trying to say, so I just decided to start over, and hopefully this video is better and you guys get to watch it. So, I can't really review this the same way I would review anything else, so I'm just going to talk about it. But I do still want to have a little bit of structure to this, so I'll tell you a little bit about the book facts and what this is, right? So this is just a box. It's empty, but this is the Calvin and Hobbes Portable Compendium Book 1, and actually it's Books 1 and 2. And this is a relatively recent release. This is by Bill Watterson. He's the only creator on this series, and he's an interesting guy. He studied political science. He wanted to be a political cartoonist, decided to make comic strips, and somehow got, I can't remember if it was Warner Brothers or someone else, to do a deal with him to syndicate his comic strip nationally, and I think maybe internationally. But he's someone that's very unhappy with the limelight. He's not someone that's interested in being popular and out there. And he also is very interesting because he's never allowed anyone to make products and toys out of his stuff, which is amazing and horrible at the same time. It's amazing because this guy is holding a gold mine of value, right? This IP, my understanding of it is that it's huge and that everyone knows it, and it's kind of like up there with like Winnie the Pooh and Mickey Mouse in terms of like notoriety and recognizability. But for whatever reason, he's like, no, I don't want people to turn this into a stupid, soulless money-making scheme. And I respect that so much. At the same time, in like the modern, post 2000s, like millennial Gen Z type world that we live in, that sucks because I want to own a thing from this and I can't. I would love a little, Calvin Funko Pop or a Hobbes, stuffed animal or something like that. And I think it'd be awesome. And that doesn't exist. Or it does, but it's only like fan made. And although I would like to support like a local business or like a small time business, I also would feel dirty doing that because I know that Bill Watterson does not want anyone to make money off of this, himself included, right? So it's like, what do I do? So interesting guy. This series is not one I have nostalgia or, childhood love for or anything. When I think about my childhood comics, I think of Transformers Armada. I think of the Bart Simpson comics. I think of Bone, although I barely read any of that. And I think of this Garfield comic that I had, that I think actually was my sister's, that we bought when we were, like 10 or 12, or when I was 10. My sister was younger than that. She was like 7. When we were at a bookstore in Mexico one time at this mall near our house, right? And that's what I think about when I think of childhood comics. And I think of Earth 1 Superman because that's the first proper American DC comic book that I ever bought, even though I bought it in Spanish from Mexico. So that's what I think about when I think of childhood comics. When I think of newspaper strips and comic books from that kind of style, I think of Peanuts, right? And that's basically it. So I really had no interest in this series. I didn't even know this series existed until I saw Sal from Comic Pop talk about this, right? And he talked about this in the sense that, like, if there was ever a chance he would have to introduce children to comic books, this is the way that he would do it. He would give them the Calvin and Hobbes books and get them to enjoy it. And I think that that's totally fair, and it really made me interested in this series, right? I was like, there has to be something to this, right? And this was around the same time that I was buying Asterix and I was trying to get into more classic, comics, right? And so this version of it came out and it dropped down to half price. So it was $10 and I bought it. And I recently got a chance to read it, right? And this is what the books are like. So this is book 2, and this is book 1, and this is the back of them. And I actually don't really like how these books look on the outside. I think that this is pretty bad design. I mean, on one hand, I love that you get to see the big bit of artwork. On the other hand, this isn't really a cover. This is just like, I don't know, it's just an image. This looks much better to me, but that's not important because you get the main image here, right? Like, this is okay. And these are supposed to be in here all the time, so it's not a big deal. But I don't really like how they look. However, the quality and the readability of these is amazing, right? So I saw Sal from Comic Pop talk about it. I picked these up. I started reading them this month, and I absolutely loved it. I really had a great time with this. It's supposed to be a comedy strip, and it's not that funny, actually. I mean, it's funny. It's mostly amusing. And the difference between amusing and funny to me is that amusing means that I recognize that it's funny, and sometimes I laugh about it. Most of the time, I just admit that it's funny. I feel some sort of contentment within me, and then I move on. Funny means that it makes me laugh out loud, right? And I would consider this to be amusing most of the time. Sometimes it's really funny, and sometimes it's actually way deeper than you would expect. And there's a certain level of off-the-cuffness to this series that really encapsulates the idea that this is a 6-year-old child. It reminds me of some of the weirdest stuff that my little cousins have done. It reminds me of watching Phineas and Ferb. And it reminds me of what I was like when I was a little kid, right? Not because I was exciting and interesting like Calvin, but because I had those same like dreams of doing weird stuff and being a space, guy. And I wondered, what it's like being an insect. And like, there is so much value in this that is difficult to quantify or difficult to kind of express for me, because it feels like my childhood. It feels like I have always known this, and yet it's something that is completely new to me, right? And that feels so dramatic to say, but it really manages to hit that kind of chord with me, right? It's really odd, because it's not like I feel deeply attached to the series or anything like that. I find it to be very comforting and very relaxing in a way that is kind of unexpected, or was unexpected when I started reading it, right? So yeah, that's basically my review of this, I guess. There are some other kind of things that I want to say. So my favorite aspect of this book is that every couple pages you get a color strip, and I love how these look. I think that they're so clean and wonderful and so easy to tell apart from the rest, and so well done to a degree that feels almost like stupid easy. Like, I look at this and I think, oh, I could draw that, right? And then I try to draw it and it looks disgusting, because Bill Watterson has such like a great technique, or he knows what he's drawing so well that it's kind of ridiculous that it looks so good, right? So I love that. And there's a few different kind of ideas that he goes back to a few times that I really like. So anytime that a spaceman spiff thing comes up, I love that. I love when Calvin is imagining himself as a Buck Rogers type character going on space adventures. That stuff is phenomenal. Most of those also happen to be in color, so that's great. I really like when he thinks about being a little insect, when he thinks that he's shrunken down, right? And I also really love the like dad reporting kind of thing. I don't know what to call it. It's like a bit where Calvin goes up to his dad and they have like a conversation about his dad's like numbers. Like, dad, your popularity has gone down, or like your popularity has gone up, or are we gonna reelect you as dad? Like, that stuff is funny as hell to me, because a 6-year-old should not have that sort of understanding of politics, or even think to apply it to their family unit. And the fact that he does is hilarious. Like, it's really funny to me, right? Like, not laugh out loud funny, just like it's immensely amusing in a way that makes me really happy inside, right? Like, I don't know why. I don't really like political stuff, but there's something so funny about that idea that I think is great. There's this kind of like irreverence and sarcasm to Calvin that is great. And I also really like that almost like surrealism or slight like magical realism element of Calvin thinking of Hobbes as a living, breathing creature and thinking that he's a real tiger when he's clearly just a stuffed animal, right? And initially I was confused by that. I was like, is he real or is he not? Is he imaginary or is he like a thing that exists, right? Eventually I realized that it was a thing that existed, that it was a stuffed animal, and that Calvin just like personified it to such an extent that Bill Watterson drew him like a real character, right? And it has like such a great vibe, and I love that aspect to it. So I really like so many things about this. And particularly, I like the second book a lot more, actually. The first one is great, and there's some funny bits in it, but the two most impactful storylines or strips happen in the second book, right? So the first one is this dancing strip. Let me see if I can find it. Where Calvin is wearing this blue shirt, and he and Hobbes are just dancing around. Like, you don't even know what music it is. I think they mention what it is later, and they mention the speed that he's playing it at. But there's something so beautiful about that panel, about that strip, that just works so well for me. It's kind of ridiculous. I don't know why, because it's a pretty simple panel. Like, there's barely any text in it at all, but there's something so great about this little happy dance. Here. Can you guys see it? I don't know why this strip is just amazing. I freaking love it. I don't know why. And then the last strip of this book is part of a storyline where a little baby raccoon is hurt, and they bring it in to try to save it. Well, actually, they don't try to save it. They try to make it comfortable in case it might die, right? Or in case it might heal, right? The next day, Calvin rushes to see if the raccoon is okay, and it turns out that the baby died, right? That it got hurt so badly that it couldn't recover, and it died. And they bury it. And Calvin later talks about, you know, what is death and why does it exist and why it sucks. And he tells us that his mom told him that it's just part of the life cycle, right? Like, that it is what it is. And that we don't really know many things about the world, about how it works. We just try to do our best with what we understand. And then Calvin and Hobbes hug, and they promise to each other that they're not going to go anywhere. And like, I don't know why that really affects me. It really works for me in a way that like makes me tear up and happy and sad, and like it's this really beautiful, very powerful, bittersweet moment that, like, wow, dude, like it's 8 little bubbles or little squares. They should not make me like that emotional, right? And so it's amazing. I loved it. I thought it was amazing. And so this isn't my favorite comic book ever. It's probably not even in the top 30, but there's something about it that's immensely special. And I recommend that if you guys have never tried it, give it a chance. It's really great. I think Bill Watterson said he would never do more. And everything that is, you know, out there in terms of Calvin and Hobbes is what you can get, right? Like, there's the giant editions that are like this big, or there's these little ones, right? And I think that the little ones are probably better. Like, these are much more accessible and easier to kind of use and enjoy. But there is something to be said about giant artwork, especially for these very simple, you know, small things, right? But wow, this is great. I recommend you guys read it. Here's my gushing review of Calvin and Hobbes. Let me know if you guys have ever read it. Let me know if you're going to after this. And thank you guys very much for watching. I really do appreciate it. So see you guys later.